Okay, I think we should start. Some more people might be coming because it's not easy to find, as you have realized. Same for us. Secret. And maybe it's also a secret, still a secret, that we should take more care of these issues like fair work in hospitality, because this is a major part of an investment process, I would dare to say. Let me just introduce our distinguished panel. On the very right, I have Wolfgang Weins. He's the one and only in ILO, looking over working conditions, decent work, and other issues related with tourism development. He has worked before. He has a PhD on trade unions and industrial relations, and here comes also, he worked for trade unions, so he knows the worker side very well. And now he's overseeing the programs of ILO together with many other partners who look into how to improve the working conditions in travel and tourism, and hotels are the biggest employer in travel and tourism, so it's of his specific concern. Sitting next to him, I have Catherine Matthews, Executive Vice President of Marriott for corporate for communication and corporate affairs. She's overseeing the whole part of sustainability and corporate responsibility in Marriott. And what is good for us, it has a high presentation in the board of Marriott. So what we have seen is a company that is taking it really seriously, and they're also receiving continuously awards of being one of the best employers of the prestigious processes that evaluate the performance of companies, not just in hotels, in tourism and hotels, but also other companies. So Marriott is on the forefront of that issue. I have Hiran Kure from Jetwing Hotels from Sri Lanka, because one major part of the discussion is on working conditions in developing markets, and he is representing Jetwing Hotels in Sri Lanka. The company was founded by his father, Herbert Kure, and they have an incoming tour operator that is doing a lot of business also with the German market, and they have 15 hotels in Sri Lanka, and some in Laos, PDR, one in Auckland. And they are also very concerned about to give a good workplace for their employees. And here I have Valentina Zeisler from DG Invest. As we said, the message is also spread out by investors. They need a specific process to assess fair working conditions. It's part of their decision-making process. So we will hear from her about this issue. She's in charge of the hotel investment portfolio of DG Invest. DG Invest is part of KfW, the big German development bank that finances development projects in Germany, in Europe, and all over the world. And DG is the branch that is looking to private sector investments, because the main portfolio of KfW is infrastructure and public investments. Okay. So I made. Let me take. You have seen the in the announcement some issues why we are having this session here. I will give some information on the background. You have it also on your seat. As I said, CSR is an increasing issue for investors. We have many organizations, even the United States overseas investment agency is having a very long list of criteria of sustainability, including working conditions. So it is an issue for investors. The problem is there are two issues. One is the development process. So what happens when a hotel is being built? Are there any issues? We often hear from NGOs that there is a problem, fishermen being taken off the beach and having problems, people getting taken off their lands for hotel and tourism developments. And also, of course, in the workplace, when the hotel starts operating, we also have this issue. We will have two rounds of questions, one on the first part of hotel developments. What happens, how can we have safeguards to take into account human rights considerations and avoid negative critical issues that then make the press and then give a bad image of hotel industry as a whole. And also how we assess this in the workplace. I would start with the first round of questions on the development phase. And I would start with the hotel investor DEG. Valentina, could you please explain us when you assess a project, how do you integrate, how do you guarantee that there was no problem before the hotel is being developed with the land use, with the land ownership, with people having had negative impact of the planned tourism development?
Well, first of all, what is important for us is that we do an integrity check of all partners. So we start by finding out who are the investors, where does the money come from, and make sure that it has gone all through the right channels. And so that is a very critical issue, of course. We would not get involved if we see that there are any kind of illegal sources being used. But then the second phase, and I think that is what you're more referring to, is that before building starts, we want to see that if local workers are being used, that whether they have a camp, how there are during that camp time situated, where do they live, in what number of rooms are they, do they have also access to water, do they have access to clean toilets and all that. And we look really at that, we walk through and check on that. Also, we would like to see where do workers come from. If I give you an example, in the Dom Rep, we had a lot of workers from Haitians, so we would look at how are they during that time when they work there, how are they allocated, and how would their working contracts perhaps differentiate from those who are from the Dom Rep. So we need to make sure that there is no sort of conflict of interest between that, and if they do get work there, that they work under the same conditions. That is very important.
Okay. And to make the question more concrete, do you have a system like criteria indicators who are given to the investors in order to guarantee those issues?
Well, the system is not something that we hand out, but we know it, I would say, by heart, and so we address certain questions to them. And then, as I said, we walk around by, looking with our own eyes what we see there. And if there are critical issues, then they are instantly addressed. It is also, of course, during the building site, extremely important for us to see that they all wear helmets, that they wear safety shoes, and that they are dressed in a proper way, so that there is a safety issue on the building side. So we also look at, have they put out notices around the building site, how to behave, what not to do, where to smoke or not smoke, and all these kind of things.
Was there one case where you did not go for a planned investment because of negative issues?
I'm quite certain, yes, but not in the hotel industry. The hotel industry, I think we have so far always identified the right projects and then made sure that everything is going as we suggested. So also when we see that on the building side these notices are missing, then we actually talk to them, and we also make sure that there is a space in that area where there's a doctor, so if there are any kind of health problems or accidents, that they immediately can be treated, that they have regular checks, also during the whole building phase, and that is taken care of. That they have a canteen, I think I didn't point that one out, and that the canteen is properly equipped which makes us look at, are there windows or is it in a dark cellar? I wouldn't like to see that. So we have, for instance, in Turkey, when we financed a project there, we looked at the canteen and we said, well, one could improve that canteen. So could you please integrate it in your financing plan, that that canteen is no longer equipped as it is today?
Okay, the very relevant issue, we have it now with the World Cup, with Qatar, the big debate over the working conditions of those who construct not only the stadiums, but also the hotels, all the infrastructure, so it is a relevant issue. I would like to put that question out to the hoteliers. Do you have a process in place to check whether where you are planning to build a hotel there had been any problems in the preparation, like land use, people being taken off the land and other issues, and also in the process of building it, what Valentina just mentioned? Do you have safeguards? Do you have evaluation, monitoring if the working conditions when the hotel is being built are really in line with human rights standards? Maybe Kathleen could start.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to compliment you for getting this topic on the agenda at IHIF, because I think too often at conferences like this, the focus is just on doing the deals and not sort of the underbelly of what happens when those deals are done, and sort of I think the growing requirements that we have to look at issues like human rights, land title, and essentially what the impact is on local community. So bravo to you for doing this. And it's great to see people coming into the room, and I think you're going to have to keep persisting on getting this on the topic. But I think that, we're sort of seeing a new shift, and I've certainly seen that in Marriott, where I've been working for 7 years. So just in terms of our business model, we are 4,000 hotels in 72 countries around the world, and we manage and we franchise those hotels. We do not own them. We do not, we are involved in the construction process, but legally the liability for that construction process and development process really is on the ownership. Yet we are a global brand that wants to be admired, respected, loved, and so we know that just in terms of our brand reputation, we are involved, and so we do have responsibility for this. So we are involved in this process in the development phase. We generally have local owners, so I'll give you an example of Haiti, where we are currently building a Marriott hotel. We found a local ownership group because in Haiti, land title is very murky. And so that expertise that you get with local ownership is really important, but you have to go through all the due diligence with that local ownership. So there's a really robust process as part of our developers to really look into who are our owners. If there are any red flags, the deal is off. Now, that doesn't mean that you've found everything. So the due diligence is a journey. It continues through the whole process, and you're constantly looking for these things. When things pop up, you've got to deal with them, obviously. So Haiti land title, a big issue, but also the whole motivation of building our hotel in Haiti has been because we believe the best thing we could do for Haiti was build a hotel where potentially we might make some profit, but might not, rather than give aid to Haiti. So already that mindset of local community impact and jobs was at the forefront. I think that with the construction phase, we have visitors that go regularly to the site from our architecture and construction process. So we have visible evidence of what's going on, and that's when we can see if they're red flags. Because if you don't fly in and you're not there on the ground, you're not going to see the kinds of things that ultimately might be the problems. So as a company, we've become much more decentralized. Our architecture and construction is locally, continentally based, and they are in at every phase of the, from groundbreaking all the way through in the construction. And ultimately, what overrides sort of what really guides our engagement on this in terms of human rights, working conditions, and everything, are core values that the company has. So we're 85 years old as a company. We have 5 core values, and those core values that guide everything we do are put people first, pursue excellence, act with integrity, embrace change, and serve our world. So ultimately, that sort of purpose-driven mindset is sort of the lens through which we do everything. That's supported by our principles of responsible business. These are principles that we've developed over time. Several decades ago, we started to have a human rights policy. More recently, we've, in 2006, adapted human trafficking into that. Sustainability came in 2007, and we continue to look at ILO principles, UN Global Compact principles, to Millennium Development Goal principles that essentially guide our principles, which are internal to Marriott, which we hold ourselves responsible to, and in many cases are above sort of what we consider the benchmark principles that guide that process. And so there's as much internal, visibility about how we're doing our deals and how hotels are being constructed, how we source our labor, how we treat our employees and associates, we call them associates, once the hotel is open. And so those are the kind of overarching things that I think address some of the things you're talking about.
Okay, maybe I hand over to Hiran Kure from the perspective of a developing country, hotel developer. How do you address those issues?
Thank you, Klaus.
Because we heard cases in Sri Lanka where there were fishermen. There was a BBC report on fishermen being and local people being taken off their land. So how do you address those issues?
Thank you. I'm completely on the other side of the fence. We are a small company from Sri Lanka, which we have 15 hotels, which we own and manage all of them. And yes, in Sri Lanka, you can get land either from the government, which is on a lease, long-term lease, or you can, as locals, we can buy outright. So most of the hotels that we have built are on lands that we own. One or two of them is on a long-term lease from the government. The hotel that we just completed in the national park, in the national park you cannot own land, so you have to lease from the government. There are no hard and fast rules, as you say, to look at which is right, which is wrong. It has to come from the bottom of your heart. If you really look at, now that you mentioned the BBC report, I think it's one of those NGOs who's looking for some news item. I mean, it's completely fabricated stories. There was in Sri Lanka, fishing is given a higher priority than tourism. The beach belongs to the people of the country. Though we have beach hotels, the beach side does not belong to us. So I don't have now, though we have about 10 beach hotels, I cannot say that beach is mine. The beach belongs to the people of the country, and the fisherman gets priority over tourism. So now, I mean, you have seen, Klaus, and many others have seen how the fishing and the tourism industry work hand in hand. The fishermen have the right to go out onto the sea to fish. They have the right to pull their nets back onto the beach. We cannot stop it. So who put out stories outside, they have to also look at what is inside, where the fishermen have the first right. Only if the fishing is not there, then can you build a hotel, or if you build a hotel, still the fishermen have the right to come onto the beach. We have also very, very strict environmental laws. Now to get a approval in Sri Lanka will take probably 12 to 18 months. You have to go through different processes. So all those are safeguards against, so anyone who's against the project, they have the right to go and complain, look, I was there, I was displaced, or whatever it is. So when you have clear title, you have a clear title, and then you can build there.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now I hand over to Mr. Weins from ILO. You have maybe you're looking at hotel and tourism developments from a more global perspective, not just the cases we just heard. What is your opinion? Is there a major issue with human rights in the development of tourism, the building of hotels, and what are you doing? What could be done to avoid such problems?
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I'm impressed by listening to. I mean, I'm a nice customer of Marriott.
Thank you.
Brackets, but it's even better to hear that there is a structured and a thought through policy on this. Concerning construction of hotels, yes, I mean, all this sounds good. We are a bit, in addition, more concerned about when the hotels are finished, about the working conditions for the people in the hotel. And let me say, I mean, to this title of this morning, when we talk about human rights, we talk about rights. We talk not about anything charity. We talk about rights. These are universal, non-negotiable rights. Full stop. Okay? Now, the problem is how to implement these rights, how to control the implementation, and so on and so forth. And therefore, we are always there to assist. We are always there to help. I mean, we know the basic fundamental rights is the UN Declaration of Human Rights. The ILO has basic conventions which are part of this UN Declaration. The Convention on Freedom of Association, Non-Discrimination, Child Labor, Forced Labor, etc., etc. What I want to focus in this short time, I think, is, especially in the major hotel chains, is the problem between the wish to deliver a proper, good service quality on the one side, and the high turnover on the other side. I think it was Marriott who did a study some years ago how expensive it is to retrain the people, 8 million or something, or billion, I can't remember. So what we have here is actually the high turnover in the sector, which affects the productivity, which affects service quality, logically. And the question is, why is the turnover high? And every time I talk with hotel managers, CEOs, association representatives over there, they say, well, we are not attractive enough. We are not sexy. Yeah. We have a bad image. My stupid questions were, why? Well, even in countries, just to say, Europe, high unemployment rate, youth, 20%, 30%, 40%, the percentage on getting people into this sector and stay into this sector is low. Yeah. It's traditionally low, okay? Now, the point is very simple. The point is not attractive because, and even every hotel manager tells me this, the working conditions are a problem. We are not talking about the natural working conditions, weekend work, night work, and so on and so on. We're talking about how these working conditions are handled within the sector. That, I think, is a major problem. And there I come to the point which is important for the ILO. This. Oh, sorry. It's okay. No one got it. Okay, good. So now I come to the point where we have the expertise also, because I think we have traditionally, again, low union density in this sector. That has to do with target groups in the sector, migrant, women, and young workers. It's a youth sector, it's a female sector in most of the countries, and it's increasingly a migrant sector. These people are difficult to organize, these people are, and so on and so forth. This leads to precarious working conditions, contracts, etc., etc., etc. Now, what we are looking for is to help and to support employers, unions, governments, tourism and ministry governments to improve social dialogue. Because if we don't get social dialogue really into reality in these companies, not at the top level, I mean, you have nice social dialogue at international level between the trade union and the employers associations. That, honestly, I don't care. I care about the workplace level because of the productivity and the service. And here is a big, big problem. You are an exception. There are other exceptions. I don't want to, well, I can mention the good examples, but I will not mention the bad examples, where, for example, at least creating or thinking about a union is one of the second major impact CEO in a company will face. The first is fire. The second, I have a business card, first fire, second union. So, though there is an old union habit and there is also a kind of a paternalistic approach to manage a hotel, which I think is not really working in the long run, which is not sustainable for all the parts involved in the sector. So what I want to focus is to say, and we did some research on this, if we look at some three major target groups, which we sometimes call also vulnerable groups, because they have the worst working conditions, etc., we would like to work together with the industry and the employers in the next 2-3 years on guidelines which we at the moment call decent work and socially responsible tourism. where we want to put in from conventions the ILO has, as I mentioned, UN declaration, etc., down to occupational safety and health, to other topics, criterias that a hotel chain, a resort or whoever can declare him or herself as a socially responsible running operation. And there we need, for sure, your experience, we need your impact. We need to be clear, as I said, human rights are not negotiable. And I think also this will help the industry on the image question. Because if we don't change this image, you have still going on this turnover, which is serious. And if I can just put another point here before you ask me, I hate the word fair. Yeah. We are not the FIFA. We are not a kindergarten. This is not a sport event. We are talking about human rights. That's all. And that is nothing to do with fair. Mm.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Weins. You touched already some issues that are in the second round of questions on the conditions at the workplace. I would now hand this over or give it back to the hoteliers. How do you assess, how do you define the fair working conditions? What can you offer to your employees, to your associates, as they are called at Marriott? Also under the aspect that the salary is one of the major cost items, so you do not have a big margin to have costly improvements for the employees. How do you balance this, reducing the cost of labor and motivating people, giving them good working conditions? What is the process in Marriott to do that?
Well, first of all, being on a panel like this is always a great education. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be on the panel, is to be with the folks who are up here. So in terms of, I think it's interesting you use the word paternalistic, because in many ways, I think hotels are like families. Now, bigger hotels are like villages, but they very much feel like they are organized on kind of family-like principles. And you know, if the family works well together, the family succeeds. If it doesn't, you've got problems. In our Marriott hotels, I think it's sort of the part of the alchemy of our success is, for example, in our Ritz-Carlton brand, the mindset is there are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. In other words, a sense of parity. It's not guest above all, or the customer is always right. It's a sense of parity of sort of this relationship. Similarly, in our Marriott brand, which is our signature brand, started more than 50 years ago, we've just shifted. We have called our employees associates because we want them to feel empowered and engaged. But with the Marriott brand, we've decided actually we want to elevate them to hosts so that they feel that as the host, in the same way that in your home you would welcome someone into your home and host them, they are hosting our guests in the hotel, as opposed to guests and associates, which doesn't achieve that parity. Now, so this is sort of the ethosphere of it. Then you get into ultimately what are the working conditions. And so again, I think historically we go back to a company that was started by a husband and wife. And after they had hired a few employees to help them deliver their growing service at a restaurant, which was their first order of business, they had somebody get sick and they realized maybe we need a doctor on staff because we can't have high absenteeism because of illness. So if we have a doctor, they can help deal with these things. This was pre-healthcare. Organically, those are the kinds of things we've seen in our company. So the notion of the benefits package actually being better than what the union can provide, and therefore we maintain that direct relationship with the employee because we give them a better benefit package. Wages. Again, I love the fact that you say you don't like the word fair, because there's a lot of conversation about fair wages, living wages. Well, how about quality wages, you know? So ultimately, if you're taking a look at your associates and they're just barely getting by, they're having to work 3 jobs, so they're falling asleep on your job, that's not going to be a good scenario. So in the US, for example, there's a big political debate over minimum wage. In virtually all of our hotels, we're already paying above the new wage level that is being proposed. So if you're paying above that, it's not so much a political issue for you. You've already decided to address that with your employees. And I think that as a company, we are minimally unionized. We have union hotels. We work very well with the labor unions in the hospitality space. But the preference at Marriott has been for a direct relationship between management and the employees. But ultimately, we learn from the unions very much, I think, in that process. One of our biggest hotels is the Marriott Marquis in New York City. And ultimately, at that hotel, we created a clinic on site and all the kinds of things that would deliver the quality that they were looking for to be able to avoid unionization, which makes us a much more profitable hotel, even with investing in all of those kinds of things. Depending on where you are in the world, we will provide employee housing. Quality employee housing, not fair employee housing. We will provide 3 meals a day, all of our hotels essentially, and certainly in emerging markets, the hotel is the source of all sustenance for the people who work in that hotel. Showers, lockers, all of those kinds of things. The employee cafeteria, when Mr. Marriott visits every hotel and our new CEO visits every hotel, he spends all of the time back at the house, walking through there to see what the employee conditions are, and visiting the employee cafeteria. When we have a taste panel to taste food, we actually taste what they're serving in the employee cafeteria in India or in Sri Lanka or whatever as part of our taste panels for the senior executive. So I think it's that mindset, but it's also the target is always moving because the needs of people are always moving, and so it's that flexibility. And I actually think that this dialogue, and it's not about social responsibility. My portfolio is global brand, PR, corporate relations, but I also have government affairs, sustainability, and social responsibility. Our principles of responsible business were hatched with my department, but also the legal department, the HR department, the development department, operations, as we all work together, to form what we believe are sort of essentially the principles of responsible business. I can address other things beyond if you have specific questions.
Thank you very much. How would you what would you answer to that question of working conditions? How do you define this in Sri Lanka, and also this question of unionization? I think that is an issue that is critical for hotels.
Well, in Sri Lanka, the situation has changed now completely. For the last 5 years. We had a terrible war going on in the country until 2009, and we can't forget conditions. I mean, people were just lucky to have a job then or something to do because there was hardly any economic development. Since the end of the war in 2009, the situation has completely changed. There is huge demand for human resources from every sector, not only in tourism. Tourism is one of them that is leading the economy, but also in the plantation sector, in the manufacturing of garments and so on. So there's a lot of things that are happening now. So obviously, if you don't provide all the good quality stuff that Kathleen spoke of, as an employee, people can choose now. Yeah. And also the Sri Lankan hotel staff, hospitality staff have a huge demand in the Middle East and in the Maldives Islands. So we are really competing to get the best and to keep the best in our island. So now it is definitely, you don't need unions there anymore. If you don't just provide good conditions, the guys go off. You lose them. You lose the battle if you don't provide good service, good quality standards of living, good food while they're on duty. In Sri Lanka, you have to give them meals on duty. It is a must. It is a given. Whether you like it or not, you have to feed them. And there is a minimum wage structure, but no good cook, no good waiter will work for the minimum wage. Forget it. You have to pay them more than that if you want to keep them. So the situation has, the circumstances have, pushed the standards up, and that's for the benefit of the people of the country.
I think one of the things is you have to give employees a voice. So one way they show their voice is they walk off the job. Yeah. They leave. They go somewhere else, But how do you provide them a voice while they're working to be able to retain them, promote them, after your investment in retaining them and career perspective?
Is a problem.
Exactly.
Below supervisory level, you know, above no problem,
Right.
but below that is a major problem.
Right. So I would say that on that, you know, we have an employee engagement survey annually, anonymous. We have fair workplace standards hotlines where you can call. We invest. Confidential. That's all confidential. We have huge investment in training, which is 100,000 hours of training provided a year at the company, which is really critical, and that's at all levels. So I think those are the things that give the employee the voice in the process.
But I would add to that it starts before. I think this is where GEG as a development finance institution has a lot to do. And this is what we offer all our hotels. So when we were last in Sri Lanka, and this is what I always do, is I look at what sort of hotel and catering schools are there, where can you recruit people from, and in what condition are they. And in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, I saw one school which is government owned, and which did not have that sort of practical work, but was very theoretical. And then I saw another school which is owned and managed by one of the hotels, but which is small and in very bad condition. And I think this is where we can come in and say, let's at the same time, when we finance in hotels, also set up like a learning restaurant or set up a private hotel and catering school where people know the hands-on work. And I've seen that wonderfully done in the Philippines, where we have financed a sort of hotel and catering school, cooking school, with a restaurant chain behind it, where people get that hands-on training, and that is so important. So what you're saying, Catherine, is very right, but I think it starts before, and that is where we have the task to make sure that people also know what their human rights are and how they can develop in their career perspective.
So you mentioned and I just blanked on that, but on the notion, you mentioned youth unemployment. I think right now we see youth unemployment as our biggest opportunity.
Yes,
because
if we do it right.
If we do it right. So essentially we are tracking the youth unemployment all over the world, and it's very high in emerging markets, obviously, but also very high in Europe and very high in the US, generally double what the unemployment rate is. And if you're trying to attract that next generation or millennial customer, one of the best ways to do that is to have a next generation workforce. So first of all, we've just debuted mobile applications. So you can apply on a mobile device to a job at Marriott Hotels. That's huge in Africa, in China, where everybody's on mobile device. They're not sitting behind a desktop anymore. And then partnerships that we found. So we're opening up a hotel in Kigali, Rwanda. In anticipation of that hotel opening, 3 years ago, we identified a hospitality, a 2-year hospitality program called the Aquila Institute for Girls. These are young women between the ages of 18 to 25, usually high school equivalency education. This is like a 2-year certificate degree that more recently has gotten an associate university degree status. And we essentially committed to them that we would take their top students in anticipation of our Kigali, Rwanda hotel opening up, and there not being a robust hospitality market in Rwanda. There's a Serena hotel, but we don't want to cannibalize Serena's employees.
Thank you.
So we started the partnership, and out of the first class of 30 girls, we hired 15 to train and be paid as salaries in our hotels in Dubai, where we bring in a lot of migrant employees from the Philippines, from Pakistan, from India, from Sri Lanka. And so those girls have just completed 1 year. At the end of 1 year, the hotel was not yet open. It was supposed to be open, but because of delays, it's not. So we gave the girls, we said, we'll either fly you home because you signed up for a year, or if you want to sign up for a second year, we will extend and actually promote you within this hotel to the next level, and you can stay the second year, and then we believe the hotel will be open. Meanwhile, we've actually hired 20 new girls from the next graduating class, so we'll have close to 40 young women from Rwanda training in Dubai who will go back and be part of the opening team in Rwanda. And then we've helped that school with connections with other people. The hospitality industry also has a wonderful program called the Youth Career Initiative in about 12 markets. And the YCI program, which is funded by the International Tourism Partnership and its members, does something similar with a 6-month on-the-job training program in our hotels. And this is across the industry a non-competitive thing. And I think that increasingly, we see this as the model. We've got to have sort of those NGO or education institution partnerships that help then source disadvantaged youth, not privileged youth, but the disadvantaged youth who are looking for that pathway into a career. And the loyalty of those young people and the opportunity you create for them is unbelievable. And we're hoping that they will ultimately be general managers, you know, of hotels in Africa.
The problem with this panel is always you have only the good guys here. You know? By the way, this taste panel would be of my personal interest. But just to give you an example on what I mean on paternalistic, old-fashioned paternalistic and the wrong way of paternalistic. 2 weeks ago, I visited a conference in Brussels, so I'm not talking about the developing countries, I talk about the EU. And there was an employer gave an example how sexy, how beautiful, and wonderful tourism is for young people. And he is a tour operator in a major city in Europe, wonderful culture, tours, etc., no doubt about this. And then he said, I have 30 people, young people, to give them a future. They can sleep in the office so they can easily start in the next morning. I requested a master degree from them and 2 to 4 languages, and I pay 1,000 euro. And that was the explanation how sexy and how future leading a job in tourism is. And we are not talking about Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, we are talking about a European country.
I think good that you mentioned that, because what we have seen, we have done a lot of research on hotels, including Marriott's, all over the world. We did stuff.
80% is small and medium size, by the way.
Yeah, that's one of the issues. One of the issues. We've done research also on the working conditions with staff interviews. What we have seen is it is more difficult to offer, especially an interesting salary in a country that has a high level of productivity. So in Germany and in the whole Europe, United States, you have workers in the car factories who produce per hour 10 times more value than any hotel employee can ever produce. So all the service industries are at the lower end of the salary scales. We've done researches also in luxury hotels in Germany that pay 1,500 euros. That is an issue, because if you look into the part of the final customer price that is salary, it is maybe highest in tourism. We had some figures like 20% of the room cost is salaries, whereas in textiles, in car factories, it is maybe 5%. So how do you balance this to keep offering interesting working conditions and not having an impact? Because especially in a budget hotel, you cannot say, oh, we cost 5 euros more than the competitor because we offer fair working conditions. This is something we did not mention so far. How do you address the customer? Is the customer really ready to add more value or to pay more for good working conditions and human rights in tourism?
Budget hotels, Klaus, I'm glad you mentioned budget hotels. It is quite different because you don't have the same number of staff. You know, now we also opened a budget hotel in Sri Lanka, because if you see Jetwing in front, it is more on the 4 to 5 star category, more service driven. You know, a 60-room hotel of ours will have 260 staff, whereas the budget hotel, we have a 35-room budget hotel. You know, we have 31 staff there, and then it's easy to pay them more because though the revenue is far less. Yeah. But the productivity and you know, you give limited service, so therefore you price it accordingly. And in Sri Lanka we give what is called a service charge. 10% of the turnover is distributed equally among all the people. So they get more money, and a lot of youth get attracted to that. Because they find it easy. I mean,
it's an interesting point, but how do you make sure that it is distributed among all
Oh,
employees?
it is. We show the turnover to all the staff. Everybody knows at the end of the month. Okay. We have a service charge committee from each department, and we tell them, okay, this month is 100 rupees the turnover, and here's your 10 rupees, which is divided from the general manager to the lowest level employee. they all get the service, same service.
And if I may ask, how do you treat that issue? Like, for instance, your chefs and the cuisine and the dishwasher, that they get something of the tips that others in the restaurant get?
Right.
Is
so
it
generally
shared,
the
or
model is that there are tipped salaries and non-tipped salaries. So there is a, you know, if you're in a non-tipped position, your hourly wage is going to be higher than if you're in a tipped position. And this is an elaborate equation that is done. One of the things we're actually going to be launching this year, though, is that we, on a more uniform basis, one of the positions that does not get tipped in a hotel is housekeepers. Housekeepers are disproportionately women, oftentimes women who are the sole breadwinners for their families. And so we are going to be putting envelopes in the rooms of our hotels. We're going to start in the U.S., sort of work through the kinks on that. And you see this, you know, in various hotels, but you don't see it uniformly. And interestingly, in the U.S., Maria Shriver, who is the daughter of Sarge Shriver, who was the one of the early heads of the Peace Corps in the U.S., worked for President John F. Kennedy. She has just issued a new report as part of an NGO she operates called Women's Nation, and she's actually looked at women in service industries and sort of the extent to which their you know, their service is not acknowledged the way positions that are oftentimes more likely held by men are acknowledged through tips or whatever salary. And she really came to us and sort of said, you know, why don't you do this in all your hotels as opposed to have it be at the discretion of a particular hotel general manager. So that's something we're looking at. But we don't want our guests to believe that that those housekeepers are counting on the tips, you know, for a good salary. So it's a complex equation on that. Yeah. But I actually think on the limited service hotels, what's interesting is those hotels thrive on and do well financially based on, and you know, a hotel has to do well financially to continue to exist. If a hotel's not making money, it will go out of business. And if a hotel is not making money under a Marriott flag, they will deflag our hotel. They were not going to be interested in us being the flag anymore. So you got to have that as sort of a, you know, a starting point. But in select service hotels, they thrive on productivity. Productivity essentially is achieved through cross-training. Cross-training is probably one of the best ways that you achieve upward mobility. And so I think that cross-training done fairly is really what allows somebody who's at the front desk of a limited service hotel to take on other responsibilities. Next thing you know, that person is a general manager of a select service hotel. After you've been general manager of a couple select service hotels, you get a chance at a larger full service hotel. And that's how you achieve your, how you go from an hourly worker at a select service hotel and find yourself as a general manager. And those are the stories that we pride ourselves on. That's the narrative we want to be part of every Marriott story, which is that ability to look for opportunity, get more training, more opportunity, mobility, and ultimately success in their career.
I found it really very interesting, all the details, and I think it's not very common that these are discussed in an event like this, but also in the public, it's not really very well known. Anyway, I would like to give the chance to the participants to have, if you have questions to the podium, I would just take them. Maybe Jeevas first.
My name is Rita Levy, and I own my own small boutique human resources recruitment company. And today I mainly work on Africa, and I also give pre-opening trainings. I would like to thank Kathleen, first of all, for very professional and your experience, your international experience, and very professional presentation. And I can only agree with everything you developed so far. And it's also so that Bill Marriott, being the founder of the Marriott brand today, has always been an outstanding example for treating his employees. I think it was him who said, it's not the guest who comes first, it's the employee, because the guest will return if the employee is giving the right service. So I not have really a concrete question. I would just like to share also some of my experience. And I have done a pre-opening in Bangui, of all places. And Yes, yes, yes. And I spent 2 weeks there training the local, the basic personnel, the local people. And some of those people came 5, 6 kilometers away. They had to get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to be at 9 o'clock at the hotel because there is no transportation. They were sometimes walking those 5, 6 kilometers. And it was an amazing experience to know that you, as a person, you are actually giving your own experience and you are feeding this experience to people who are actually very hungry to get this exposure and to get the opportunity to learn and to grow. And I think that I had a feeling that somehow in this presentation, we were put on the accusation box as hoteliers for not always respecting the human rights. But I think that when you look at mainly the development countries, you also have to look at the governments. And it is one thing to hammer on human rights. It's another thing to have to work in a country where there are anti-gay laws, where there is no child protection, and where the salary is not equal between women and men. So this is just some...
But that is a big chance for the hotel. As you rightly say, hotels
can
be a village, you know. They can make really a change within the culture as well.
Okay, I think another question. Who has another question? Okay.
Just to amplify one part of what Rita said.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm Chuck Wood from the Rockwell Group. We're a design firm. And I'm partly asking the question because I'm ultimately responsible for the safety of our people who travel internationally quite a bit. And it's regarding gay and lesbian rights. And in Arizona, last week, the governor vetoed a law that would have allowed businesses to deny service to other businesses and individuals based on religious justifications. I'm sure Marriott was pounding the table.
Actually, Apple, Marriott, and American Airlines were the 3 businesses that came out and told the governor to veto the bill.
Right. So taking it to an extreme, though, is the recent law that was passed in Uganda, which is very draconian. And I don't know if Marriott is in Uganda, but I think Shangri-La is. The question is, how do you react in that environment?
Yeah, I think this is really challenging, and it's kind of on our front burner right now. So we are very proud that we have a 100% rating with the Human Rights Campaign. We had 100%, and then they added transgender surgery benefits as a requirement. We were not offering that, and through folks like me saying we've got to do all of these things. This is obviously the standards HRC has put out there. We just got the 100% rating because we added that benefit. And we met with them recently in Davos at the World Economic Forum, where the Human Rights Campaign for the first time hosted a breakfast to try to get awareness about this in the global context. And they are really focusing, they're US-based, but they're really focusing now beyond US borders and issues like Arizona on the global story. Even they are sort of treading carefully here because they don't want to put people's lives in jeopardy in countries by pushing them to advocate too boldly. So they don't want to empower people who then will be imprisoned or, you know, killed in the process. But, and fortunately, we do not have a hotel yet in Uganda or Nigeria. We have hotels in Russia. In all of these hotels, we essentially say for our employees, every employee will get full equal benefits and full equal rights within the hotel. But in terms of being super visible about advocating for LGBT travel in those countries, I think we would probably moderate our marketing campaigns so as not to, I think, create a risky situation. But we're looking at it because in the US we're doing that. So, you know, how do we move carefully, putting people first with a focus on human rights without jeopardizing our license to do business in countries that have laws currently? And how do we advocate for changing those laws in productive ways? And I think it first starts internally in your own house, and making sure that all of those rights exist internally to your own house and that the signals are there. and then ultimately what the next step is. And so I think you're going to see a lot of conversation bubbling up on this. And we take people like HRC as our kind of, we're locked in arm with them to kind of navigate how we move into this space.
We're a little bit running out of time. I have 3 more people who want to put a question, maybe not a big statement, but just a question, and then we have people in the last round. So
Great. And you're Rockwell Group?
Yes.
So we're doing projects with you in New York City and everything, which is exciting.
Okay, hi, my name's Pat. I'm the head of CSR and sustainability for Shangri-La. A quick sharing because I think it resonates with what Kathleen and Hiran have shared, but also I want to ask Wolfgang and Valentina your comments on the supply chain, reinforcing human rights in the supply chain, because obviously you look at your own people, charity starts at home, it's got to be your employees. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you don't want to go down the way of textile. So what do you do about ensuring human rights being practiced by your first, second, and third tier suppliers? That's my question. The quick sharing, if I may. Shangri-La owns and manages 89% of all its hotels. So we have the pleasure of having a policy down to the way Kathleen has presented it in the Marriott, following ILO standards, the UN Global Compact, you know, and as a Chinese company, that's not always easy. Trying to enforce governance, it's not always easy, but it's made strides. And in coming into Sri Lanka, that one of the biggest things that I think here, and I will talk to you about later on as well, is we spoke to Atkin Spence, we spoke to Jetwing, and the staff who wanted to move. So Shangri-La's opening 2 hotels in Colombo and then in Hambantota. The desire to learn service was way beyond what Shangri-La International Tourism School, I think was Valentina's reference, way beyond what they could offer. And as my job is to find CSR programs, and I came back without one. I said, if you want a decent CSR program, you got to A, teach them English, and B, teach them service. So we had a roadshow of about 290 Sri Lankan trainees, all below 30, who all could only say, I want job, I want salary. We showed them what a hotel looks like, and they're absolutely no clue. But if there is one thing, it is the desire to be part of it. Of those 270, 280 that we spoke with, there were 3 women who attended, 3 who sat in the far back and said, we're curious, but this is such a scary industry. So when we were presenting, I was standing in front, and all these Sri Lankan men, we kind of I moved it, and I just tried to stand at the back and face the women, and I said, I too was you. And I broke into this very, paternalistic, patriarchal industry. And it gave them hope. There is 160 of them who are in 8 countries of our operations now, all training, and they're actually finishing by the end of March, and they will open those 2 hotels, the first one early next year. But I'd like to echo that because that's exactly the model of Rwanda that Marriott's doing, and it's the way forward. I want to find more, kind of structured programs like that. If there was a way to work with Valentina or with ILO to have models like that, I think that's a great way for the industry to start really embracing practicing HR. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maybe take the other 2 contributions.
Good afternoon. Chuma Anosike. I'm an owner operating in Nigeria. I just want to give a slightly different perspective on 2 of the issues. Now, in terms of the reality for us, we have human resource problems. We have infrastructure issues, basically. And now, when you're talking about balancing human rights, fair work, or quality wages, and all that, you have a challenge as an owner. And now, one of the hotels in which I have a participatory interest is managed by one of the big hotel chains. I won't mention. It's not Marriott, by the way. But I hear you're coming, so
we are coming soon.
Get ready for a fight.
Yep.
Anyway, now, you're always trying to balance because the cost is a major issue for us as an owner. Now, when you're talking of quality wages, decent working conditions, and all that, you also have to factor in how productive are the staff. Do they actually earn the wage they're demanding? Because again, as an owner, you want to make some profit, but you also want to treat your staff decently. You want to pay a decent wage. But a lot of the staff do not actually merit that wage, I'm sorry to say, because they just don't produce the kind of services you can then, because it's all linked up. If you provide a quality service, then I can attract a certain level of clientele and charge a certain amount, and then it all, So that's one side of it. So you're trying to balance the owner's interest vis-a-vis what the operator is bringing. And then, you know, typically, the owner typically bears most of those costs anyway. Right. That's something I think Kathleen forgot to mention. You can have all these fancy programs, very good, but at the end of the day, most of those costs are transferred to the owners. So we have to juggle and say, look, we're prepared to pay a certain amount of money as long as we get a certain level of service. That's one side. Now, what we are trying to do, and I can disclose I'm speaking to Valentina about, is set up a hospitality institute. That's one area I think we can do a lot in, both in Nigeria and the general West Africa region. There's a huge HR deficit, which we think we can do. And that will also increase the general level of, well, will increase the quality of personnel available. Hopefully, they will be able to earn a better wage. And I think, again, that fits into the cycle of what we're trying to do. So those are the couple of comments I have.
Thank you. We have really fast.
Good afternoon. I am Alex, a senior student at EHL. I don't have much experience as you do, but I had one experience in Kenya and I will work in Tanzania. You talk about brand, you say about career perspective and so on. I fully agree with you. But my question is, how do you do with an independent hotel? Because as soon as you spend a lot of time to train them, to give them opportunities, as soon they will leave for a big brand because it's a huge opportunity for them and their family. So do you have advices how to do something to keep them, but at the same time to train them for independent hotel?
Maybe I give just the last round. I start with Valentina because there was a question on supply chains and human rights in supply chains, and also this training issue, how you invest and how you promote this.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Klaus. I mean, oh, I have my own, yes. Sorry. Well, when it comes to the supply chain, that is, of course, extremely important to look at. And we very often cooperate with GIZ, who is here our sister company, that we send them into the market. Not we send them, but you send your people into the market. And they do a very detailed analysis and look at where do agrarian products come from, where does meat come from, and they look in very much detail at the whole chain of that. We also do that while we do our own due diligence, but that of course can't be as detailed as you can do it. And if we have a feeling that something in that country is not yet in the way that hotels require it, then we very much encourage that we improve the packaging, that we improve the sort of the whole chain, so that transport is being delivered in a chilled way, that products are of a quality that not only the restaurant and the hotel needs, but also the supermarket, the local supermarket, so that by improving the quality of what the farmer can do himself, he will then be able to not only deliver to hotels and restaurants, but also to supermarkets, and perhaps later even qualify for export. But that is one thing, and the other is what you're doing, and I think that is in more details. So.
Okay. The question also on the supply chains, and one issue that he raised, that non-branded hotels, individual hotels, have a problem investing in really human resource development because there is a big risk that the people will leave and go for a branded hotel. You have your own.
On the supply chain, I think learning from other sectors would be useful, like furniture industry, like textile industry. We have big projects also in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, on better work in the textile industry. The important thing, I think, is to have a proper based contract with the suppliers.
And yes, definitely, yeah.
And more important,
I didn't mention that, no. Yes.
And more important is the monitoring.
Yes.
I mean, you can have a lot of nice contracts if you don't monitor it. That's not nice.
No, I was only mentioning, you know, the sort of time before the hotel opens, when you have your general manager, but not everyone else yet, that you have somebody like the opening manager who will then also look at where are supply chains that work and where are those that do not work, and what can one do to improve them. But I fully agree with you that, of course, contracts regarding suppliers are extremely important, and we even look at, when we look at green certifications, for instance, that we see how are they being delivered. Do they use diesel trucks to deliver, or do they deliver by other methods?
I mean, on SME, yeah, that I have no easy answer to this, to be honest. We are doing with OECD now, a study will be finished by end of the year on so-called, we call it quality jobs in SMEs tourism, to first explain and describe the dimension from an employment perspective, and to describe the skills problem and the skills dimension on the other side. I'm always wondering why the SMEs, who represent so many of, I mean, as I said, globally speaking, 80% of employment are based on SMEs, not able to develop something which could help career perspective within SMEs, would build a network on qualification and skill passports, which the EU luckily now put on website, to give the people a chance to move, to give the I mean, for big hotels, it's not a problem. Even, I mean, I know big hotels where they give a shit, honestly, for the people below supervisory level on their career perspective. I know a guy from a hotel in Nepal, right, who is writing me every half year where he is now because the hotel is not giving him any opportunity to improve and to make it better. The last job was in Spain, which was probably not a good idea. But anyway, what I want to say on this productivity and stuff, it's this is a typical collective bargaining question, which is not my part. I can just assist, but it's up to the union and the employer to do this. The egg and chick question is very simple in this sector. The productivity of stuff depends on how you treat stuff. Very simple. Because this is the only product you have. And if you treat the stuff and skill the stuff badly, you will be not surprised that the productivity is low. And then you have this cycle. We know that less than 50% for staffing, you need less than 50% on so-called technical qualification, but definitely more than 50, 60, 70% on so-called soft skills. And this is not just language. It is commitment, it is passion, it's loyalty, etc., etc. And that, coming back to my beginning, leads to the question of social dialogue, proper labor management relation, proper discussion, proper communication between workers and management. That is a basic key for a service sector where people serve people, gentlemen serve gentlemen. Yeah.
Okay, I hand over to Hiran and then to Kathleen for the final comment on those questions.
Well, as for supply chain, we now, within Sri Lanka, we try to serve only Sri Lankan food as much as possible. Whether it's fruits, it's only homegrown fruits. We don't serve any imported fish. Being an island, we have plenty of fish in our own country and things like that. And we find that most of the, other than the Sri Lankan customers, the foreign customers, they love that idea. They think, oh, well done. We have only tropical fruits and, fish found in our own seas, that kind of stuff. As for retaining, I can tell you, some you're going to lose, some you're going to win. If you're a small company, there are advantages in that because you'll know each one of them very well. You can care for them. You can, and still you'll lose a few because obviously a company like Marriott or Shangri-La or Four Seasons, there are more opportunities to grow in them. There are more training opportunities, the opportunity to work 1 year in Dubai, another year in somewhere else, which, as a small company you cannot provide. So obviously 50% you're going to lose. The other 50% you'll keep because of the special love and care you'll provide for them.
So I will be brief because I have to go to a 2 o'clock UN-WTO conversation that is going to be similar to this over at the ITB. But I think that you mentioned that the good guys are on the panel, but not the bad guys. I do believe that putting forth the best stories tends to lift all boats. And I think that focusing on the incredibly powerful multiplier effect of our industry, an industry that can actually take people and put them into the formal economy for the first time in their lives, pulling them off farms and other informal economic livelihoods, and give them the training and the career elevation is really powerful. So talking about sort of the multiplier effect we have in our communities, I think is really important, and the good things that we're doing tends to make everybody want to aspire to be better, I think. We're working with GIZ, taking a look at 5 hotel markets around the world, and actually doing case studies on hotels. We started in Peru, where we found that we put $10 million a year back into the local Lima economy, 9 million almost of which is wages. We interviewed all the employees at that hotel to find out what they were making before they worked for us and how much they're making now, what they spent on groceries before they worked for us, what they're spending on groceries now, what they're spending on their children's education before they worked with us, and what they're spending now. And really found this incredibly powerful economic development story that was part of that hotel. We're going to be doing that similarly in Hanoi with a new hotel we have there, Haiti, and other markets. Because if we can show that, we've got a great message for governments to put in the infrastructure they need to put in, because we're saying, look at what we're generating in terms of your local economies and your GDP and the training and human capital development that goes on. Supply chain is a very important part of that. So it's not only what happens within our hotels, we say, but what happens outside of our hotels. Ultimately, we have supplier principles that are very similar to our principles of human rights internally. And I'm going to give you a copy of all of our principles before we leave. But ultimately, for suppliers, we make them adhere on Tier 1 to a safe and secure work environment, an inclusive environment with respect, diversity, and opportunity for the employees, and then also supporting the elimination of things like forced human trafficking, forced labor conditions, things like that. And that they are sustainable, ultimately, which is another part of our principles of responsible business. But then again, what do you do to try to help grow more small and medium enterprises? And so we are in a partnership through the Clinton Global Initiative. I actually challenge and offer the opportunity to Shangri-La and other hotels to come join that. It's a number of companies that together have said, we will basically spend $1.5 billion over the next 5 years with women-owned businesses in emerging markets of the world. We will mentor those women to try to help grow their businesses so they can scale up and provide us on a consistent basis the quality of product we need, whether it's lettuce or beef or chef's hats or uniforms or contracted labor that we might use as an HR service. And ultimately helping those women-owned businesses grow, which we have seen has a wonderful multiplier effect in terms of elevating families in the communities where we do business. So how we kind of get our own house in order and then have this multiplier effect, and then telling that story, and then bringing more people into the tent on some of these programs and partnerships and commitments to actually continue to improve what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you very, very much, Kathleen. Thank to the podium for this excellent debate. I think it would have should have had many more people hearing it. It will be televised, so it is in the IHIF history. What I would like to suggest is that we keep on working on these issues, because I think we just touched some major aspects of it, and it should be we should talk with the bench and with Questex and other hotel events in the world that this should be part of the agenda for those hotel investment conferences as well. Thank you very much, and have a nice lunch and have a nice evening.